All right, what we got here, Hornady XTP 200 grain bullet. So one of the things that we got to look at is how the bullet might fit. Most of these I'm going to load to 1.6 inches, which I could load all the way down into the crimp. Maybe I need to see how that goes if I want to do that. I could, in theory, do that, but all of mine are loaded out to right here. They're the maximum length. You know, so just, I don't know. Cantilures are not always the ultimate thing. This will be the pistol. I'm using this Colt gun case because, God, this thing is massive. So, this is the Ruger Redhawk. This is a 1985 model. One of the things I like about this one is that a lot of people call this, you know, a product of the ultimate glory years of Ruger in those days between the 60s and maybe 1990, where these were just some of the best stuff that they had. Now, what's interesting is I believe that the Redhawk body here, for the most part, is one piece of metal, except for one here, and maybe something that comes out here when you extend this. But generally, there is one very large piece of metal that runs the entire length of most of this. And then this trigger has been added and fitted in. But what makes this extremely strong is that there's not a whole lot of fittings or anything to really go loose. So obviously there's a lot that you know, we can talk about that in particular, but it is just a nice gun and it feels nice. It's so heavy. One of the things here you can see, this is a non-MIM trigger and non-MIM hammer. You know, these are going to be compared largely to Smith & Wessons, which a lot of them have gone to MIM parts. There's not really any problems with them. They just look ugly. And I like having the sharp edges on a lot of these machined parts. They just feel good. They feel better. So this is just something that, you know, I'm happy about. I'm using A-Zoom snap caps in here. I don't think that there should be any issue dry firing this a gazillion times, but I just like having them there for that reason. One of the things I think is funny is a lot of these Ruger grips are just kind of, if I can be honest, it's kind of Dorkville, to be honest. But the deal is that they're very ergonomically sound, and when I'm holding this pistol, I get that angle. You know, you want that where you can point your finger and it points the same direction. So the ergonomics of this grip really do work. They're just not aesthetically pleasing. I've had the grip off. You know, these ones use some interesting things where we are using a different set of springs than a lot of other revolvers use, where they might use the difference. Some rifles will use a little leaf spring, some will use a coil spring in here. So sometimes that can actually, you know, matter for some gunsmithing purposes. So generally speaking, you know, I'm not really worried about that. So I am hand loading right now for the 44 Magnum, and I'm using these to start with. These are the Hornady 200 grain, and I'm loading up basically what's in the Hogden manual with several different powders. I am loading up some medium power loads with they'd be medium power for 44 special. One load, I'm actually going to be getting this bullet to be leaving the barrel hopefully at around 1,200 feet per second. That'd make a dynamite self-defense load. It's using Winchester 231 powder, something that's really known well for 45 Colt, as well as 9mm 40, 45. It's a great fast-burning pistol powder. We're going a little bit slower with HS6. HS6, I'm probably going to expect somewhere between 1,400 and something, maybe 1,500 with one of the loads. It's under max. It's about a grain under max, but I'm not going to give too much load data on here. You really need to examine your own load books and things and kind of do what's right for you. Given that this is a really strong bodied revolver, I'm not that afraid of trying stuff on it, and it's got scuff marks and things. It's not perfect condition. So what I will be doing then after that is Enforcer. I'm loading about a grain under max on that, and I expect that to go between maybe from 15 to 1600. And I expect that to be extremely fast. And then I'm expecting a couple of loads that I have of H110. I went really low on H110 on another outing, which I might show up here. And what I ended up with was a non-light. So what ended up happening is that the primer went, and then the powder kind of got all crunchy, and it may have sizzled, but it did not burn. And then the bullet squibbed here. So squib is when a bullet goes into the barrel, but it doesn't actually travel down the barrel. It can cause a horrendous issue if you load up another round and shoot one behind it. It can cause an explosion sometimes. So obviously we want to avoid that. I took the gun out of commission. I actually marked the remaining rounds with these X's, and I wrote unsafe on them. So these might light primers, but I don't know if they'll go. So these are actually the loaded lengths here if you want to check it out. It's actually below the cantilure, but I'm loading to the 1.6 inch. So I could load them down in theory. These were loaded with a Lee loader. I'm not super happy with the Lee loader because I did explode a primer without trying. What I've got now is this Lee hand loader. You've seen my other things, but I'm in a different house right now. I'm in a different area, so we're moving, and I'd like to eventually get all that stuff there. But this, I actually did a bunch of cases today. And I set these, and I have I learned another little trick for this. That if you just gloop a little bit of this sizing lube on there, you can just smear a little bit out, run it all over the case. This Lee dry sizing, it's basically dry lube, even though it's wet right here, but it works just fine. And so my first time with this also, hopefully it's going to be a success. I loaded up some stuff for my range trip tomorrow, which I'm going to include some information here for. But these 200 grain XTPs, these would be good for almost anything. I don't really see them as something that's going to be largely used for self-defense. I would use much less powerful stuff for self-defense. Just generally, this would be great against animals though. So if you're carrying in the woods, 200 grain isn't my choice. I'd go up to 300 for things like bears and anything that can hurt your back. But between 200 and 250 grain is very popular. There's a guy named Elmer Keith who used this round, and it was one of his most popular contributions to his writings, was talking about all of his adventures with the 44 Magnum. So, but yeah, this is what we're using here. 44 cal XTP, and I got a couple of boxes of these, so I'm going to use them. I'm actually using some gold metal. Now, from what I've been reading, you don't actually need to buy these exact ones, but these are large Magnum pistol match primers. So I don't know if that's going to be necessary, but I've heard that for large pistol, just large pistol is large pistol Magnum. It's the same thing. So I'd really like to see if that's true. That I might save an extra $20 on a brick. I know primers are not the easiest thing to get, but I'm less than an hour away from a place that has a lot of specialty reloading equipment. So, but once again, I have 231, Enforcer, HS6, and H110. So I kind of have a good spread of the powders here. I'm interested to see, kind of where they're at. But if you want to go high end, this is one. I know that a guy that's doing 1,800 feet per second out of a 240 grain out of one of these, a 7.5 inch. So I think that, me going a grain under the max loads is probably fine. They are not compressed, but they're about 95% with the 28 grain H110. And then I have one that's a little under the minimum. I'm going to shoot those last because I'd really not squib, but I am about 5 or 6 grains more than I did when I did a super low load. So just something to consider. All right, so but this is my newer acquisition. It's technically one of my grail guns. It is for a lot of people, but I think when you compare it to my next sort of series of guns. I'm going to have a Colt Python 6-inch that I'm going to shoot tomorrow, as well as my Ruger Speed 6, which I think I'm maybe going to have sent for a trigger job. Given that this one has such a sweet trigger pull, I just feel like, you know, it feels really good, and I am quick with it. It has that perfect kind of action where you can hang it on your finger in single action and it won't pop. Which is really important. A lot of guys who get these trigger jobs done give a little 2-pound single action trigger. In my opinion, that makes these guns a little unsafe. If it's cocked and you drop it, there may be a chance that you might be losing a toe or something, or worse. So, but just there's a nice hard wall and it breaks there. You know, I do have some stuff that I would carry in it as of right now. This Hornady 240 grain XTP and the Hornady Classic loading. So that's just something that I'll be carrying, and it makes a good fireball, and I just need to practice getting some groups down. What I'd like to do, though, is just get maybe a self-defense load going on here, and I think that Win 231 is going to be good. And generally speaking, I don't really see the Win 231 not igniting. I'm right around 12 grains on it, which is about 4 times as much as you'd put in a 9mm or a 38 special kind of load. Usually you're doing between 4 and 6 grains sometimes in those, maybe down in the 3s. So anywho, this is my Ruger hot gun.